How's it going, everyone? Hope everyone is well. Slightly different video this time around. I am back on my feet after a little bit of an injury, so I thought I'd make some cookies for my family and friends. So I'm going to go through the recipe and just how I made them. So it's not my own recipe. I'll put a link in the description below. In front of me I just have like sugar, cocoa powder, Nutella, that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much it with this. It's not a lot. Make sure you have some eggs and of course some butter as well. Use unsalted butter for this one. In the beginning, I kind of did the Nutella bit first, just adding a few dollops onto a plate. If you want to use a baking paper on the plate first to kind of separate it easier later on, do that. But I just went with this time around. So small blobs to medium blobs, put them into a plate, set it into the fridge or your freezer. Probably the fridge is probably more ideal. Otherwise, it's hard to loosen up after the freezer. Onto the dry ingredients. So that's just mixing the flour, the baking powder, and a little bit of salt. So nothing special here. Do it based on the measurements that are on screen and in the description below. I've kind of gone above or below in certain cases. Nothing major, just as long as it's not huge differences, should be fine. But yeah, sometimes I just kind of wing it a little bit. I can't be able to be too exact. Once you put that all into a bowl, just mix it together a little bit. Then I want to put the cocoa powder together. So usually I just use cocoa powder for baking, but this time I went with 50% of that and 50% of the Twinings chocolate drink powder, just because of a recommendation from my sister. Turned out decently, to be quite honest. So once I've got the cocoa powder done, I'll just add that to the flour as well and then give that a little bit of a mix. Then I go on to mixing the sugar, so that's white sugar and then the brown sugar as well. Now I did a little bit less of the sugar just because I've used the Twinings chocolate drink powder. I figured that's got a lot of sugar in it, so I'm just going to reduce the amount of raw sugar that I'm using at the same time. I'm going to put that to the side for the time being and then jump onto the chocolate and then just whack that around a little bit. I might not actually recommend you do it with a mallet like I did here, just because the piece of the packet might end up lodging into pieces of the chunks, and that's not a good thing. But I'm only making it for myself and my friends and family. Don't tell them. But otherwise, just use a knife and then chop the pieces carefully. That might be easier for you guys. So just chop, and then move on to the next thing. Going back to the sugar mixture, it's time to add the room temperature butter. So I did that in little bits just to make it easier to mix through. So if you want to do it all in one go, go for it. You might have a harder time with it, you may not. But for me, a little bit at a time is the easier approach. And keep mixing, and then eventually you'll get a nice consistency of the mixture together. Scrape it from the bowl itself and all together. Then you need to add the eggs. Recipe says use 2 large eggs. I don't have large eggs. I have medium eggs, so I used 3 of them, which was a little bit too much, so I had to add more flour after the fact. So just keep that in mind. 2 medium eggs is probably fine. I've done that in the past as well, and it turned out just fine. And then just give that a mix as well. Just be careful with it because you don't want things to fly and splash everywhere. So mix gently as you go along, and eventually it will come together quite nicely. So add a little bit of vanilla essence and then give that just a quick mix. Then it's time to add the dry ingredients, which is just the flour and cocoa powder mixture. Add that bit by bit, just because if you add all of it, it's just going to be a huge floury mess. So bit by bit goes a long way, and eventually you'll get through it and it'll make, or should make, a nice consistency. Now I used 3 medium eggs, so it meant that I had to add a little bit of extra flour after the fact just to get the dough consistency a bit better. So yeah, just use 2 medium eggs if you've only got medium sized eggs. If you've got 2 large eggs like the recipe says, then it's fine. I think either way is fine, to be honest. By the end of it, you'll get a nice thick and heavy cookie dough mixture. By that point, you want to start adding the chocolate chunks or other kind of ingredients, dry ingredients that you would have put in at the end. So in my case, it's just going to be the Bournville chocolate bar right here. Just give that a bit of a mix in, nothing too major here, just kind of fold it in. At this stage, you're going to prepare the oven. So my oven is basically on or off despite the temperature. So I've just put it on 5 for the sake of it, but it should be fine. And whilst the oven preheats, I'm going to come back and sort out the Nutella blobs that we did right at the beginning. So I froze mine, so they're pretty solid on the plate and going to be a bit difficult to pry off. So use a blunt knife or a spoon or something. Eventually they'll come off, or just let it melt just a little bit at room temperature. Now it's going to get messy now, so once you've got the Nutella off, just get it in your hand and then just scoop a little bit of the cookie dough, add the Nutella in and kind of fold the dough around it to make a small ball. Doesn't need to be neat, just get stuck in, get your hands dirty with this one. It doesn't need to be pristine here. You know, if you're making cookies at the end of the day, they don't need to be biscuits, so don't worry too much about your hands getting messy. Me personally, my hands were a total mess after this, and it was totally worth it. So then add all the cookie dough balls to your tray. In my case, I've got 6 lined up here. Use bigger balls if you want for a bigger cookie spread overall. Leave them a few inches apart just so the cookie can spread nicely and evenly without it all kind of coming into a big giant mess. So I'm going to leave them in the oven for about 10 minutes. You can do a couple of minutes extra or less. Depends on your own preference of the end result. So let's take them out and have a look. So let's set these cookies down. So remember, they're straight from the oven, so I'm not going to touch them just yet. Just let them be for a little bit on there, and then we'll cool them down a bit more later on as well. So they're looking pretty good so far. Now here's a look at the cookies cool down a little bit more, and they look absolutely delicious if I do say so myself. Now this isn't my recipe at all, it's from the link in the description below. So let me know how it goes for you guys. Let me know what you thought of it yourself and your family, how these went down in your household. For me personally, I've been following this recipe for a good few years now, and it just, yeah, it's yummy. The Nutella is just my addition to it. You can change it how you want. I hope you enjoyed this video, very different to my normal routine. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.